And for Catherine.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you.
Well done.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm so honoured to be here on stage today and be your MC and help us get through a lovely day of fantastic speakers and great topics, which I know you'll be madly writing notes and typing. But before I kick off the day, I'd like to do a welcome with Duat Moe, who is the president of the Institute of PR. And after Duat, I'm going to come back on stage and share with you my signature keynote, Show Me the Money. Then we're going to have a morning coffee break. During the day, you know the toilets are past the lifts where you came in. Coffee and tea will be served outside. You're welcome to come back in at the tables. Then after lunch, we'll do the same thing. And then this evening, we've got dinner. So as we go through the day, I'll just update you on what's coming up next. All right, so without further ado, let me hand over to Muad. Come up, please, and welcome Duat to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to Singapore on behalf of the Institute of Public Relations Singapore, the IPRS. My deepest thanks to Julian for inviting me and to Stephanie and the event team for organizing this fantastic summit. So please join me to thank Julian. It was lovely to meet some of you yesterday evening and this morning. This is a great crowd. I'm amazed by how everyone wears their international hat and articulate their local experience with such ease. You know, I'm so proud, very impressed with this crowd. The Network One is indeed the world's leading independent agencies network. We are looking at 2 excellent days with the best speakers and invaluable time with each other. My name is Duat, and I'm the president of the IPRS. I serve on the Institute along with 9 fellow council members who are leaders in agencies and communications groups. The Institute was set up in 1970. A bunch of PR people back in the early days of an emerging nation of Singapore got together for mutual support and to formalize a professional body. Very indie, you would say. The mission is to advance the PR profession and to uphold practice standards. Today, we have members from across communication disciplines, PR, internal comms, corporate comms, public affairs, marketing, brand communications, media, and some journalists are also our members. And our members are from both the agency and client sides. We are very concerned and very involved in the effort to bring school and industry together. For this, we have 10 student chapters with tertiary institutions where we hold talks, arrange for agency visits, we mentor and we coach. Nurturing the next generation of communicators is critical to the growth of our profession. Nurture, attract, and retain these talents. That's what we are aiming to do. The Institute organizes ongoing content and networking events, the IPRS Learning Luncheons Online, the IPRS Accredited Members Dinner Dialogues, cross-disciplinary events with our partners in legal, HR, and the non-profit sectors. And we conduct training in foundational and strategic communication skills. We have 2 signature events, the IPRS Prism Awards, one of the oldest PR awards in Singapore, set up in 1986, and the IPRS Prism Summit, which we launched last year in 2022. As a Singaporean, I'm proud and very grateful that this world-class summit has made its way here. Thank you very much. Singapore, the place, is uniquely small and successful. Singapore, the brand, is uniquely independent and successful. The ability to hold our own in a global network of complex relationships, not easy. There are many studies on how surprising Singapore is from the political and branding perspectives. Instead, if I may, I would like to share some of my thoughts about Singapore as a first-generation citizen, our mindset, our experiences, and outlook. The nation of Singapore was born on the 9th of August, 1965. I am just a year older than Singapore. My father came from the island of Hainan, China, in the 1920s, just after the First World War, and my mother in the late 1940s, just after the Second World War. I'm Singaporean. My ethnicity is Chinese. My childhood friend and neighbor was a fun-loving Malay girl. My favorite fruit is the Indian cuisine, nasi biryani. I read English literature and language in university, and my favorite movie is Casablanca. So, really mixed. In one of my first roles in PR as Director of PR and Fundraising for the Salvation Army, I went on a study trip to New York City. Beautiful, beautiful city. And I returned 3 days after 9/11. And I was on one of those fateful flight routes. And when I saw the building come down, I thought, wow, I'm alive. I was fortunate as a Singaporean to have worked on projects that took me to Oman, Qatar, Mexico City, China, and Japan. My upbringing in multicultural Singapore has helped me to embrace duality and at the same time look for common ground. The reason for any of my achievements and opportunities given to me is simply that Singapore is an economic miracle. We survived the transition from colony to independence in the 60s, the world oil crisis of the 70s, our very own construction and manufacturing recession of the 80s, the Asian currency crisis of the 90s, severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, in 2003, where I lost a few of my really very good friends, the global financial crisis of 2008, the pandemic of the last few years, and now traversing world dynamics to promote economic peace the best we can. Singapore, our people, public and private sectors are always in battle gear, in sneakers ready to run, to safeguard a strong economy, to survive, to grow. Getting it right, preferably the first try, tracking results, KPIs, pushing for innovation, creative enterprises, getting ahead in fintech, agri-tech, medtech, biztech, AI, the next frontier. We do all that, and fast. Singapore will always do something about something, fine-tuning our education pedagogy, bringing in foreign investment, building business infrastructure, housing, transport developments, national campaigns for health, cybersecurity, ensuring racial harmony, upskilling, sending aid overseas, the list goes on. We are very busy. ESG is now top of mind. Environment, social, and governance. In the context of Singapore's economic growth, I would like to add another E to ESG, EESG. We are doing our best to ensure that the first E, economics, is informed by how we protect our environment, take care of our society, and getting policies and the policing of these policies in place. It is significant that the summit is held here in the green icon in the heart of the city, Park Royal Collection, Pickering, a beautiful hotel in a garden. The following features are curated and measured: 50 varieties of plants in the tropical urban high-rise garden, short building length to maximize daylight reaching internal spaces, more than 50% of guest corridors are with natural light and fresh air, food waste digester converts food waste into grey water, not destined for landfills. Optically, the hotel is impressive. Open the door, look inside, it must be equally and honestly so. I'm sure you all can attest to that. One of my fellow IPRS Council members, Elaine Chan, is the Director of Communications and Sustainability at the Park Royal Collections, Marina Bay, Singapore, another excellent hotel in the group. Communications is now synonymous with sustainability. What is your organization doing about it, and how are you communicating it? I believe that PR people are the best, are needed in every industry and organization. The PR person today is a digital savvy knowledge worker who is also a trusted counsel, well-versed in geopolitics, cultural diversity, social inclusion, and climate change. I love PR people. A good PR person can smell the blood in a story, spot a disaster from afar, and take a situation from crisis to calm. Love them. I believe that the PR profession is one of the most important and indispensable. I joined the IPRS in my early years in PR. I found friendship and camaraderie among its members. After more than 20 years of being a member, I stepped forward to volunteer and serve. Along with fellow council members and past presidents, we led the Institute through a digital transformation, transform or die literally, to meet the needs of our members as we navigate a constantly evolving communications landscape. PR is a profession with good people. I mentioned the name, or rather the acronym PRISM earlier on. The IPRS PRISM Awards, the IPRS PRISM Summit. PRISM stands for Public Relations in Service of Mankind. We believe that PR is a force for good. If I might summarize Singapore in a few words: pragmatic, multicultural, competitive, and authentic. The meaning and nuances in these words are found in our political system, in our food, our music, our stories, our social structure, our national campaigns, and our business ethos and our interpersonal dealings. Perhaps this is the formula for success, not just Singapore's success. I'm excited for our industry and believe good things come out of our willingness to explore, connect, honor each other's values, and take the first steps. This leaves me to wish you all a fantastic summit and success in your business and personal journey. Thank you very much.
I too love PR. I've had a long history with the Public Relations Institute in Australia, and I've seen also, as Duet has here in Singapore, that sector known as PR expand well into the communications sector and into experiential as well. So damage limitation and crisis, but also social media, the whole gamut. Most of the agencies also looking at hiring designers as well. So following on from that speech, I'd like to now take the stage and take you through the world of Show Me the Money. Before I start though, I'd like to just set the scene for those of you who don't know me and didn't read my bio. So I'm Catherine Williams, the founder of K-Mint Profit Academy in Australia, and I've worked for 30 years across the globe with agencies above the line, below the line, on the line, in between, across the line. It's all one big agency, multi-service these days for many. However, I have a deep love of finance and have always been in the finance sector, starting with BBDO, where I was 10 years in the finance department, moving across to the UK, where I held various roles, finance director for PR, and then into advertising, and also Peppy Jeans, a little sidestep into the world of manufacturing. So product side and what the brands actually need. So we're returning to Australia, where I now live there in Melbourne with my husband and my 11-year-old son. I created K-Mint, which is to serve agencies and help the people in your teams understand the financial side. That's not what they signed up for. Most often they're creative and they love the craft, or they're media and they love the metrics. And yourselves as business owners, you've come from a background of a calling, and sometimes the money side is not really like a natural bent. You've made it though, and you're making it, and you will go far. Training your staff to think like you think as mini business owners in your agency is really important. Otherwise, the burden is really heavy. And as you go through and try and scale, you need to share a little bit more. And how you do that will help you as a business owner to scale and have a life as well as enjoy your passion, your agency. So today, as I show and present to you Show Me the Money, take it from a perspective of you're running an agency, it's clearly quite successful, you could do something different, and as I share some of the metrics through the seminar here, you'll find that others around the world, brand side as well as agency side, are not looking to pre-COVID what we did and trying to recreate what we did before. They're all looking to create something new. So I'm hoping that today you'll find some new inspiration. I'm certain you will from the variety of speakers we have. Everyone sharing what they're learning in this world and this economy that we're in together. So without further ado, shall we roll the slide, Show Me the Money, and I'll take you through what I think some useful tips for today will be. Make notes and think about your people back home. What will they be doing in the agency from what you hear today? So today I'm going to cover 3 aspects: the scope of work, pricing for profit, and then I'm going to leave you with a call to action, a 90-day sprint. What are you going to do? And this applies for all speakers today. Once you've heard the session, what are you going to do differently when you go back home? Let's start with the scope of work. Now, when I say scope of work, most of you go, oh, that's the brief from the client, it's a scope of work, an SOW, I understand that. I'm going to split it into 2 though for you. I believe there's 2 scopes of work, and it all depends on how you feel as a consumer. So I'm going to cover the psychology of pricing when you're scoping, the cost-based pricing, which is internal scoping, and we do that every day. And then I'm going to stretch you into the world of value-based cost of work and scoping. So these three areas, again, think about your people. When you receive a brief, we all get in a little huddle in a room and you do a brainstorm and you've got your creative and your strategist and you're sitting down and you're answering the brief and straight away you're building estimates with your drop-down hourly rate menus and your markups and you're scoping the work, what it's going to take you to do from an internal cost-based perspective. That's pretty typical. The advanced and the more pioneering agencies are looking at the value-based pricing. It's my little pointer work. Ooh. Value-based, where you're not actually looking internally, you're now looking externally. And it all depends on how the clients are actually thinking about money, their investment, their budget. So let's kick off with the psychology of price. Now, every one of you in this room has a relationship with money. Some of you love it, some of you hate it. Most of us love it and hate it all the time, different times of day, different places. It's really important to actually consider, and there's a raft of books and education that you can read up on about the psyche of price. I think it's a nice little professional development breakfast that you should have with your team, so your people understand that when they're presenting to a client, how is the client feeling? Are they, money's not an object, or they're tight with budget? You know, this is really important to have a little read the room, see what they're thinking. So I'm going to start you off with this model here. Are they a basement price, first floor price, second floor price, or are they rooftop brand pricing type of person? This applies to us as well. Every human being has a propensity to, at some stage, usually earlier in your life, you're at this cost price. You'll have clients that just want to pay the basement price, the basic base price. They're not actually going to pay this top price. They could never pay that. They never ever pay the highest price. They think they get the same thing for the cheapest price. Then there are others that will always buy the Louis Vuitton handbag. They don't want anything else except the Louis Vuitton handbag. But you could equally get a handbag down the market for $10,000 up here or $10 down at the market. So it doesn't matter what you're selling, how you feel about the actual object. And as I say on the right here, it is all about the context and appeal. Context, where are you? Appeal, do you want it? Why do you want it? I don't need to tell you because you're all in the space of brand building. So this is really where it comes to. So when you're presenting back to your clients the response to the brief, the scope of work, consider where they might be here. Are they actually looking at doing something different to their competitors? Talk to them about that. Make it a topic to try and raise them from the cheapest possible solution to something that's a little bit more competitor driven. That might inspire them to go, oh yes, well we do want to be better than them. The value pricing, this is when you're now talking about externally and their brand, what's in it for them, what happens to their business. Not about your costs, about them. And this is, as we know, the most powerful that puts a price premium on everything. If you can create a proposition that is rooftop and you've got your client to rise to that level. So this is a whole game in itself, worth playing. Most of you flew to get here. Now, were you sitting up here in the front class, business class, or were you sitting just behind this little bit of perspex on that seat there? We all got on through the same door. We all get off through the same door. We all arrive at the same destination. These guys obviously got a little bit of civil service, probably got a real knife, stainless steel knife and fork, and these guys got plastic. At the end of the day, these guys have got their own toilet areas, whereas the bathroom down the back for the rest. So how you choose, even on something as basic as airline travel, is all about the psychology of price. Do you need to be in this seat, or are you looking to sit here, just directly behind? Airlines do it really well, and how do they actually then charge more, just as you're boarding the gate, if you have to get on that flight? So think about your clients as well. If it's an urgent job, maybe it should cost a little bit more. If they need something a little special, maybe you should be putting it up a bit. It's all setting the scene, which we know, and flying all the time, we understand how another business does it. So look outside at best practice elsewhere. Again, this is context and appeal. And everybody has a different feeling as to where they're going to sit on that aircraft. So all of your clients will also have a different opinion as to how they want their work delivered. I'd like to take you through the Nike story. I think it's a really nice scene setter for understanding value and the pricing context point. The business life cycle being the point in case here. So you have the psychological makeup of your client, but now you've also got where is your client in the business life cycle. So the Nike story, which I know many of you will be familiar with, started many years ago in '71, and it was at its launch phase. So Phil Knight at that stage and his coach, his track coach, Bill, created a small run of their shoes, and they hired a young designer, 23-year-old from Portland State University, Carolyn Davidson, to come up with the swoosh. She spent 17 and a half hours, came up with 6 logos, and charged him $35 US. So at that point, that was probably about right. It didn't take her long, 17 and a half hours. At $2 an hour, that works out to be US dollars. Pretty cheap, but she was a student, so it felt right. As the business grows, you're now no longer in launch. So as opposed to a startup or a small business as it was for Phil at that time, now the business is doing well, it's starting to be in the millions. The next thing is it's reaching maturity. So today, Nike is worth what was it? I got it off the press yesterday. 109 million in brand value. That's the 2020 research from Kantar. I don't think Carolyn Davidson would charge $35 to design them a swoosh today. And the reason she wouldn't is because she'd understand, and this is for you as well, working with your clients, if they've passed the launch phase and they're now growth and maturity, the value of what you're creating reaches further. So Carolyn would understand that in designing her swoosh today, as the business is worth so much more and is global, the reach and the extent to which her logo is going to have more power and clout obviously is going to command a slightly higher price than the original $35. Pricing it is still very slippery, so I'm going to take you through that journey shortly to understand how would you price it, because there is no right answer, but I'm going to give you some clues. Renewal and decline. This comes into play when you've got a brand that's rebranding. It takes about 20 years for a brand to become a top recognised brand through consistent marketing. So in about that time, you wouldn't see the successful brands' logos changing. I'm talking about logos in particular and trademark a lot today because it's probably the easiest and the most regular piece of work that we would do in our businesses. You don't see them chopping and changing. They'll evolve, and when it goes through a renewal, that's another opportunity for you to assess the makeup of the client, what business cycle life stage is it at, and then how much would it be worth. And I'll take you through a pricing model to consider. I think this is a very valuable story because it's one that you can access very easily. We've lived it. We probably all own a pair of Nike shoes at some point, we have. We know what it is. We know how much money they invest in their brand to protect it fiercely. And all of the best brands in the world protect their brands fiercely from competitors. It is a thing. So no matter how you feel about it, when you create for your clients, take it very seriously because they are going to spend some money. They're going to sink some serious coin in it because it has huge value. We don't even need to see the product anymore. We don't even need to say it's a swoosh or a tick. We just know by looking at it. The visual cue is so powerful. And that goes for every logo, great logo that you can even think of. You don't even need to know the name. That's how powerful it can be. But at the beginning in the launch phase, did Carolyn know that? Did Phil know that? Probably not. So that's, again, a really important part. You quite often don't know at the very early stage when you're talking to your client that something is going to last for 52 years and become a worldwide success. Sometimes you just don't know. It can be very speculative. So I'm going to give you a clue on how you might price that. It might be $35 with some other little catch we'll come to. So I'm going to step away from looking at that huge vision that we've got the luxury of looking back and seeing how that worked for Nike into something that's pretty more typical in our agency world, which is the cost-based pricing. The reason we base most of our pricing on cost is because that's how we hire our people and that's how we buy our services and supplies. There's always a cost. Some agencies always talk about the cost, looking at reducing the cost rather than increasing value. So the cost base is a pretty typical starting point. And me as a CFO, that's where we start. What are the costs to run the business? And you as business owners, what does it cost to run the business? And you go from there, you're building from the bottom up. So I wanted to start with a typical example. The client's given you a scope of work. This could be an RFP or RFQ, could just be a proposal or a scope of work given to you by a client. From the client's perspective, and I want you to think from the agency perspective as well. So you're going to take this brief, looks like it's to design a car, and you're going to give it to an experienced creative talent. I've made up some figures here. I'm saying that the cost to the business is $50 an hour for an experienced junior, and they're going to take 5 hours to do the task. The cost is $250 for the hours that they do the work. Now we happen to have, it looks like a 3 times multiple. So if you're familiar with the 3 times multiple, that's a classic industry way to work out what the sell price would be. It's based on once to cover the wage, in this case $50 an hour, another $50 to cover your operating expenses, and then a further $50, the profit component. That's the 3 times rule. Some agencies will be doing 2.5, and often when you're working with procurement, they'll be looking to get you for 2 times. That only works if the middle part, the OPEX, is less than exactly the salary amount. It's a rough rule of thumb. There's many rules of thumbs. The industry bodies will give you some guidance as well as to what the average rates are, as well as these typical ones, and what a really great agency should be charging. For our example here, the profit would be the difference between the $50 and $150, $100 an hour, 5 hours is $500. And we charge our client, quote them $750 for our junior to do the work. So, sounds pretty normal. I'm pretty sure that's how most of your agencies work. That $50, that's probably in your job management solution if you're working on the hourly rates as the cost rate. Or if you're one of my clients, I'd probably have $150 as my cost rate. And then I might have the sell rate a bit higher because I'm adding value to it because of the agency we are. Alternative, you might have 100 as a cost rate in your job management solution, 50 for the wage, 50 for your overheads, and the difference will be $50 an hour instead of 100. So at least when you're looking at job cost reports, you can see $50 an hour profit. And that gets chewed up when you overrun, and it's possible that will happen when you have a senior come and check the work. Let's say agency B gets the same brief, gives it to a senior. Senior knows what to do like that. They come in, they're a little bit more expensive. I would have thought they'd be more than $90 an hour, but that's what it is in this example. They take 2 hours instead of 5 to do it, $180 to us. Same rate though. So this agency has decided that the same rate for the same job, 2 hours, 300 billable, the profit is $60, 120, and the client only gets charged 300. So if I was the client and I got those both, I'm obviously going to choose this one from a cost perspective, because quite often when you're an RFP or RFQ, you don't know who's doing the work. You just know $150 an hour, combining the rate cards, which is what procurement will do. They'll look at all the rate cards from all the submissions and the applicants, and they'll often do that as a first round cull. It's only the second round when they start to look at who's in your team or if there is a relationship, and we'll cover that in a later topic today, where you do away with those hourly rates. But really what the point is, and I know you understand this, I'm just trying to make it a thing for this morning, is that from the agency perspective, there's no incentive for us to give it to the senior and do it quicker, because we're actually not going to make as much profit. We might get it done, we might win the business though, so perhaps that is a strategic decision. But in the normal course of running the business, from the client's perspective, why should they pay more because it took longer? It's almost the same result, or is it? Because it's not, if you look at me, this one's coloured, this one's not. So you don't know until you actually do the job. There is a real conflict of interest here. The agencies want to see a higher profit, more hours potentially on a job, and the clients don't really want to pay for the hours. They want this one, and it's cheaper, so I'm going to take that one. So giving them choice is important, but just understanding how one party wants to push the rate down, another one wants to see it go up. If agencies want to increase, no incentive to do it quicker, because we won't make as much. So in a sea of sameness, potentially, you have all just become commodities if this is how you're pricing. The clients, and I know, again, you're probably quite familiar with this theory, the sea of sameness, you are all different. If you ask me, you are all incredibly different. Your skills, your people, your education, where you've come from, the clients you've worked on, the way you do work is all very different. But the minute you commoditise yourself and use a drop-down hourly rate menu and pick a senior resource or a junior resource to do your work, From a client's perspective, you can see you're all just the same. That's how they're assessing you. Procurement have got all the rate cards, and they're looking at how many hours you might do to deliver the job. They're certainly looking at your portfolio as well, so I'm not going to dismiss that just yet. But this is a real problem for our industry, and this is the way we have worked for decades. And I'm saying that there's nothing really wrong with it, but you need to step a little bit beyond, and I think we're at that place now where we can do that. This would be a base, because as I said, if your cost rate is your wages plus your operating expenses plus your profit, you have to know that first. And this is how we pay our people. So it kind of makes sense, and it's pretty easy. I think that's the point. It's very easy to do it this way. But for those of you that are braver to step a little further, you either increase your profit and be confident that you do that. It's not going to be in this presentation today, but any of you that did economics at school might know the distribution bell curve. And halfway down the curve is exactly the norm. So most agencies would be sitting in the middle of their rates. And if you're lagging behind, it means you're cheaper than the normal rate position. So if any of you are involved in benchmark studies, you'll get positioned. Where are you? You're behind the norm, or are you ahead of the curve? If you're ahead of the curve, it means you're value pricing. You're charging more than where the norm position is. Now, if you're lagging, all you want to do is move forward to get to the norm. And if you're on the norm, all you want to do is get ahead of the curve and go to the value pricing. And if you're ahead of the curve, you're going to keep going. So it's a really nice visual that you can use annually, again, as a PD session with your team. Where do we sit in respect to the industry? Now, this is very a la same, benchmark against everybody else. But knowing it as a starting point is valuable. Then you can decide your own destiny from there. Well, we're better than the norm because. We're different to the norm because. And you start to position yourself ahead of the curve. If this is how you're pricing, I think it's important to understand where you are and what you're preparing to do as the next step. So what would be a 90-day plan for you to reassess your rates? Again, looking at it as an agency, typically, I've just picked a $5 million business here, turnover, total sales. Not talking about media here, this is just, so no commissions, this is just hourly rates. So if your income is circa 5 mil, again, in Australia and APAC region, about 60%, which is quite low, is what the utilisation would be for your teams. Now, we're probably targeting 80, 90% for juniors. Business owners might be 30% billable, or they're an overhead, considered rent. They're not even in this mix. But 60% is about normal. So on that distribution curve, 60% would be in the middle. If you don't know what your utilisation is, take a look. And I know you're probably all doing this anyway. You've probably got the finance department doing numbers every month. This is where the game starts. It's really important to get this right. A lot of agencies I work with, when I start working with them, they're probably 50%. That means at lunchtime today, we all go home. Because whatever you're doing in the afternoon, not billable. That means that the other 60%, the other side, which is 40%, is not billable. So 60% gives us 5 mil. 40%, the other bit, 3 mil, 3.3. There could be some genuine non-billable in here, but that's the game I'm playing for. Give me the money, show me the money. Why have I not got that money in my bank account? That is just being pushed off the table. Now, I'm just using a simple example of 60-40 at the moment. If you've got a higher utilisation, it will obviously change it up. But it's a nice little visual that you could, again, roll out in your business. You could roll it by division, you can roll it by team, you can roll it by person. And that little bit over there, which is actually quite a lot, isn't it, 3 mil, is what you're playing for. Show your teams. Get them to calculate it. Get them to calculate their own. It's pretty important, because if this is what your game is, then play it like it matters. It really does. So let's say of that 40%, maybe there's some investment internally, where we're working on our own website, working on our own socials, we're having WIP meetings. Maybe there's BD in there as well, so you've got some business development. But even if that was half, there's still a good mil, 1.5 in there, that has been pushed off the table that we have no idea why we're not earning that. There'll be a lot of overruns in here. So fixed price quoting and then spending longer that we're not recouping. That's important too, because the only way we're going to get better at that is two things. One, train your people to do it better next time. Spend the time, use some of the non-billable to do it better. Learn from post-mortem, what do we do wrong there? Spend the time, book in 2 meetings, 2 hours is all you need. Assess what went wrong there. Like it matters. So we do it better next time, get better at it. The other part would be scope creep, which happens all the time, and why not? Just make the clients pay for it. So have a change order request process, assess your people on that. So if there's an overrun, did you actually ask your client to pay more? Did you explain why? Don't be shy, this is commercial. I'm certain that they don't, when they're selling their product or service, they might have a little bit of discounting available to them, but they will be charging for the second pair of shoes. Create a program internally where your people understand what's at stake here. For their own personal management, get better at what you do as a team. So in a cost-based business, got to double up on words there. The only way you can actually increase or scale your agency is by increasing your billings, which means, and also looking at that productivity that I just mentioned, and then you can increase people. So add more people. If that's how you're billing, that's how we think we're going to grow. But don't keep putting more people on if it's just all falling out the back because you've got these things a bit weak. It is something that we do every month, and we have people in finance clunking the figures. I certainly know when I was back in the BBDO days, and that is 30 years ago, we had 170 staff in total, and 20 of them were doing job bags the old-fashioned way, and moving money and moving costs across client jobs, trying to balance it all up, looking at the timesheets, going upstairs to the creative department and banging on the door and saying, "Where's your timesheet?" One of our senior creatives, Hank Dawson, sadly is no longer with us, award-winning creative. I was the finance manager that had to go up and go, "Hank, can I have your timesheets, please? Please." He was one of our most expensive key resources, but he would not do his timesheets. He'd be gone from missing for days in some cases. He'd certainly never come back from lunch. Remember, this is back in the 80s, 90s. Here I am knocking on the door, asking him for his timesheets. And he said, "Catherine, come in," or Kathy, they used to call me, "Kathy, come in." And I've gone, yeah, good, he's going to give me the timesheets. He goes, "I will give you my timesheets if you will do the foxtrot with me." I'm like, I'm the finance girl. I'm like, you can't be serious. Anyway, the foxtrot it was. So every week I had to go up and do the foxtrot and get the timesheets from Hank. Play it like it's a game because I got the timesheets. Doing them weekly, really important. I don't like it when I work with an agency where their staff do their timesheets at the end of the month. That is ridiculous. I can't even remember what I did last week, let alone 3 weeks ago. Have it up to date. All the systems that you're using, the job management solutions online, are dynamic today. I should be able to, as a GAD or a senior account director or client manager, look at my job today and see the impact of what's happened. If my people haven't done the timesheets, if that's how you work, it's really important. Get everyone on board to make sense of it. In fact, the people that are not doing the timesheets, get them to do the reporting. That'll change it up a bit. So I've got this great video. I've played it so many times over my time. It's an oldie, and you'll see because there's someone smoking in the room. I wanted to play it for you. When I said there was 3.3 million at stake on that business of 5 mil turnover, I'm pretty much saying, manage it like it matters, because it does. If you could increase your billings, your productivity, and get $1 million more, you've not increased any of your costs. The people are all there, they're just not billing themselves out, particularly the senior resources that are worth so much, so valuable. If you could earn an extra $1 million, or translate that, if you're a $10 million, make it higher, 2 mil, share it with your people, incentivise them. And it doesn't have to even be money. And that's why I picked this particular example to show you how fun it could be if you gamify this and manage it like it matters. Can you put some volume? I'm going to go back. Is the volume working? Yeah? Thank you.
kein Bier, drum trinken wir es hier.
So I love it because it's such a simple idea. Do you like the neons, Chris? So I think it's a really great idea. And back in BBDO days, we used to have the tea lady come around on a Friday with the tea trolley with all the drinks, red wine and spirits and chips underneath. And we all looked forward to receiving that. And it just kind of stopped as we tried to reduce the costs. However, as we can see, there is quite a lot available to us of untapped billing potential if you are working on the hourly rate. And even rewarding by beer is sometimes just a quite fun team way to do it. You'll have plenty of other ideas. Ask your team to brainstorm, what would you like if we did actually increase our billability? That's all about internal stuff, but we can do it because that's for us to do. And ultimately what I'm saying is, you know, the clients don't want to pay for that, they want to pay for the results, not how long it took. However, if that's the way your agency is working, start there and get it right. Now I'd actually like to move us forward to value-based pricing. Now you need to have got the first part done first before you can actually start playing this game. Some of you may already be doing this and there'll be some stretch for you in this session. So based on your client's perspective, I've come up with a bit of a visual, I'm going to stand over here, of what value are you creating? Again, this is a simple way that your team could create, and for every client, somebody that's different for all of them. What would you be increasing? What position? Would you be increasing their revenue? Are you looking to increase profit, efficiency, visibility? What are you reducing? Maybe you're reducing something for them. So Shaver Shop did this with their production on sending out of online orders by reducing the packaging, saved millions. So maybe there's something here, reducing the waste. What are you improving? Perhaps it's a process you've designed. Some information that they didn't have. Morale, internal comms, reputation. We'll get Sam up a little later. Creating something, of course we do this all the time. Strategy, process, brand. What is it you're doing for them? It's all about them, not about us anymore. Yes, we've got people and costs that we're going to cover, but talk to them about them. What's in it for them? What are you increasing? It's based on their goals, not our costs. That little table is a really good one. You can create that individually in your own agencies for every single client as part of your annual SWOT. Now you're talking about pricing for profit, not so much your costs. I'd like to introduce you to the value pricing wheel. One of the things as a finance director over the years I've really loathed, I'm going to share you a little secret. I was a D- math student. I actually didn't get numbers at all. And part of it is because you'd get your math textbook with all the words and those horrible formulas. And I just couldn't do it. I like to visualise, and we have seen a couple of numbers on my slide deck, but there are very few. And most of my work, there will be numbers, but wherever possible, and I've got some clients in the audience who will attest to this, visualise it for your team. So if your finance people can't do this, buddy up with a designer in the business and try and visualise it. For me, this is a 50-page, 60-page book visualised onto a single slide, which talks to you about the value pricing options that you have as an agency. So moving in around in varying degrees of risk from the 12 o'clock spoke through conflicts of interest that we just talked about. So we want to increase our hours, clients want to reduce the hours. We want to increase our markups and margins, clients want to reduce that. They don't want to be charged any of that. Through levels of efficiency into choice, give them choice, no matter whether you're using these first ones or not. Give them options. 3 choices is good, any more you'll start to confuse them. So that good, better and best. So you may be responding to brief, which is like middle of the range, but give them something a little cheaper even, there's nothing wrong with that, and then give them something that's even better and a higher price. Do you remember the house at the beginning? Some clients are always going to choose the lower one, others are going to want the best. But if you don't present it to them, they will never choose it. So give them 3 choices always. When you're responding to RFP, RFQs, those requests, Try and use a range. Don't lock in at one thing. Don't give them one answer. Keep the conversation going, give them choice. Try and force them to have a further conversation with you. Efficiencies is when you start creating bundles. Do you want fries with that? We do this in so many other areas of life. Products and templates as well, particularly if you're doing EDMs. Create those, and subscriptions, classic these days in social. So we're not going to cover those so much today, but you might be looking at doing quarterly subscriptions paid up front, annual subscriptions, mid, senior, or bronze, platinum, silver, however you want to create the programs and offer it to clients. If you don't have them created, get your team together. Use some of that non-billable time, maybe an hour a month as a hot meeting where you're going to look at creating these. Stop talking about it and do it and offer it to your client. ROI and value pricing is where I'm at today. This is positioning, and you're starting to move around into intellectual property. That's another, we'll talk about this next. This is PD for your people. They don't really do it in any of the undergraduate degrees, the diplomas, certainly not in PR or advertising. If you're doing law, you might do an IP section. I took intellectual property with Harvard during COVID, first time they ever offered it online. I was so excited. It's a fascinating area, and we are in the knowledge economy. It's what you know that's making the difference. It's not farming and manufacturing for us. This is what we sell. This is why you pay the money you pay for your people, because they're damn smart. Now learn how to use it and capitalize on it. Uses and rollovers. We see this in our photography industry and talent. Licenses and royalties. If you're not using these as a pricing mechanism, I'm going to show you today a little bit of a snip of how you can do it. Luxury pricing. We automatically think of luggage and handbags and cars here. Why not us? We wouldn't probably use that term when you think about the highbrow agencies charging big rates. But that's because they've reached this height of luxury, scarcity, special. Why not us? Think it first and then make it happen. Equity. This is another one when you're making impact on perhaps a startup. Bit speculative, bit risky, but why not? Maybe once or twice a year you do take equity in a business. Think Shark Tank, think Dragon's Den. Give it a whirl. Why not? Why not? Don't do what you did yesterday. Do something different. So this money wheel, the pricing wheel, value pricing wheel is actually on the money wheel, which is the foundation piece and is now an online course. But the value pricing starts to make you think about other ways you could potentially be charging your clients and building up that price quote. So back to the hourly rates. Even the humble hourly rate has an opportunity for you. You have a base rate. This is what we talked about before. The base rate sits in your job management solution. It is the cost of the labour plus the operating expenses, those two things for an hour, possibly a little bit of profit as well as your base rate. From there, you can negotiate. Perhaps a slightly higher amount for projects, 25% more maybe. The retainer rate doesn't necessarily have to be cheaper than the base rate. Maybe it is your base rate. It's this one here. This is the choice. You wouldn't give the client the base rate. You'd probably give them just a choice between a project and a retainer. Now, I don't want you to all go, I can't do it, Catherine, because it's smoke and mirrors. It's how you position it. You want to encourage potentially clients for the longer term with you on a scope of work for a year, 24 months, 36 months. Clients that have been with you for a long time, build the proposition for a retainer-based agreement instead of ad hoc projects. PRs are actually pretty good at this. So the PR retainer is like the norm for that industry, that part of the sector, because it's the short term and the longer term. But any of those that are not using retainer or finding clients backing off from retainer, talk to them about why that would be an advantage. Pricing this project rate a little higher can sometimes incentivise, and looking at that scope of work over the longer term may sway them to the retainer rate. But you should have a difference between those two. You can always not charge them the higher rate if they want to go on project rate, but I'm suggesting that when you meet a new client, you give them the two and help them go, oh yeah, I do have a little bit more work that's coming, maybe we should go on the retainer. If retainer is not a great word to use, because I know there are a lot of brands that just hate this from years of perhaps under-servicing and paying larger, then try volume discount. Volume discount is perhaps another way to say to the client, well, the more you give to us, maybe there's a better rate we can do. If the client actually is using multiple agencies, this is another way to encourage them to bring that work to you. Looking at the volume. So the volume with a different scale as to how you might carve up some of your profit and let go some of it for the efficiencies you'll create when you get more work. And the rush rate and the VIP rate, these two are almost like opposing. So a rush rate is like a penalty where you're actually saying to a client, if you're late giving me the content, I've had to ask Johnny to stay back again. He missed his tennis match and I'm going to have to pay him overtime. So make your client pay for that. It's a penalty. All right, well, we'll let you off this time. But if it happens again, I'm really going to have to ping you on it because the impact on my team is high. I don't want Johnny to leave because he's missed tennis again. VIPs are the opposite. It's like very important person might always think that psychology of price. This could be like 25% more. 25% more for that rush rate or also for the VIP rate. So it's saying, get your content to me early or on time as agreed per our timeline, or I'll sting you that 25% as the rush. VIP, maybe they're paying 25% always, which means they get you like that. They really do jump the queue if they bring stuff in late. Perhaps, though, if we are actually charging that extra, that we're paying people extra when it happens. So reward your people. Teach them to know this, and they can call you on it, but they have to build the client to be able to access it. So you might split it. They'll get 5% of that 25 if they can conduct themselves this way. So as I said, even the base rate, the humble hourly rate, has options for you to look differently at how you might have looked at it yesterday. Let's move into the world of intellectual property. It's one of my favourite topics because I guess it's not defined, and there's some agencies that really rock this, that just get it, and there are others that it's just like, oh. The copyright one, you'll all know this. As soon as you make notes today, it's yours. You are the author of that work, and it is your right as to what happens with that work. It happens in your agencies as well. Whoever first puts their ideas into a fixed and tangible medium, then it becomes immediately copywritten. So legally protected by copyright. But the only way we know that is if you actually use the copyright symbol. So on all of your presentation decks, on anything you write, all your social media, all of your private lists of clients and suppliers, please make sure you use the copyright symbol. Just down in the footer will do. So people know that it's something of worth, that it is legally protected. Now, if it's a staff member through their employment contracts, you as the agency owner, proprietary limited, or what the entity owns. But if it's a freelancer or a contractor, they own it. So you need to make sure when you're heads of agreement with your contractors and freelancers that they are assigning the copyright that they create across to you. A bit of a distinction between tangible and intangible. And intellectual property is intangible. So unlike the house or a car or a mobile phone where you've got a car, you can see all the components that have gone in to make the particular asset. And if it's a house, I can put a big fence around it and you cannot take it. If it's a car, I've got a key and it's in a garage. You cannot take it. It's mine. If I've got some expensive leather gear or some really nice jeans, they've got that piece of wire through it with a little magnetic thing on it. And I've got a security guard at the door, bouncer. So you cannot steal my stock. An idea is very different. The minute I show it to you, you show your client, you speak it to your client, they can't unhear it. They can't unsee it. So be very careful when you're sharing your ideas. Use the signs and symbols that I'm about to show you. Treat it with respect. I know you all get very scared sometimes when you're presenting, particularly in the pitch environment, and I'm not even going to talk about that. We still do it. Don't be scared. Use these signs and symbols to protect your assets. It's really difficult because people think it's just easy, and it's not necessarily. It's intangible, which means you can't touch it, but it is very subjective on how you would value it and whether it's actually even going to fly. Regardless, make sure that you understand these 4 simple steps. The idea comes first, you then protect it, then you can place a value on it, and then you're going to sell it. That's what we do. So again, this is a visual representation of years of intellectual property studies. Just 4 steps. Teach your people. You've got the idea first. What's valuable here? learn to protect those elements, then place a value on it, very subjective, but get something, and then learn to sell it. So this is a little busy slide coming up when we learn how to protect. I was going to split it, but I just thought from timing perspective, we'll go for... We're talking particularly trademarks. There are several different intellectual property regimes. Patents is one, trade secrets, and trademarks is really what I wanted to focus on today because it's quite typical across all of our world. The traditional way to protect, legally protect and show, identify that you have something of value is a word mark through a logo, a tagline, colour and sound. These are senses that we have. But as time goes by, these non-traditional marks have become more and more important for brand marketeers like ourselves, where we have shape, sound. 80% of what we see is filtered through the eyes, but the audio is actually even quicker to our neuron patterns. Remembering, scent is also extremely powerful, brings up a memory, a feeling. Movement is more modern, so you'll see some of the brands using movement to indicate something different from their competitors. And holograms. My favourite one here for a mark would be the Intel chip, the chip inside your computers, which none of us have ever seen. But as I speak, you can probably visualise that little holograph sticker on the bottom of your laptop. And you can probably even hear the tune that they have consistently used for years. That's what you do every day. You create a distinction, a feeling, a look for your clients that could be used for multiple years. Here's a great classic just to show you. So here we're looking at a colour, we're looking at a specific font. You'll see the R in a circle, which means it's registered. The ribbon was added later, and the shape, if I put the original Coke bottle, you can apparently tell what that bottle is in the dark. These are all distinct assets, intangible assets of Coca-Cola. There's a multitude of brand taglines that they use as well, which I'm not showing today, but every time you have a new one, you can have a list for your clients of all the different taglines, straplines that you've created for them. So how do we place an idea, value it in our client's meeting? The Citibank example that I'm going to show illustrates again why the cost and the time it took us is totally irrelevant. This also makes more sense for the Nike example that we looked at before, and there's another one coming up. Paula Scher, who was the original designer on the Citi logo, works for Pentagram in the States. She's a well-seasoned creative, so she would be the experienced creative. She explains it better than I ever could, so I'll just play the video.
And it's problematic because a lot of clients like to buy process, and I think they're not getting their money's worth, like I solved it too fast. I mean, Michael Beirut told me to shut up in an initial meeting. I drew the Citibank logo, after we had the first meeting, I drew it on a napkin, walked out. They had to merge Travelers and Citi, and Travelers had an umbrella, and Citibank is a word, and the lowercase thing of a T is an umbrella. You stick an arc on the top and you got it. I mean, it didn't take, it's a second. It's all over the world. Like, how can it be that you talk to somebody and it's done in a second? But it is done in a second. It's done in a second in 34 years. It's done in a second, and every experience and every movie and everything of my life that's in my head.
So your creatives, your people, I couldn't have said it better. $1.5 million for the Citi logo in 1998, so 25 odd years ago. Sounds like a pretty good investment because it's used all over the world and will continue to be used. A powerful representation of their brand. So Pentagram, well experienced, probably didn't have a problem asking for that money. The client was able to afford it. If you don't ask, you don't get. Some of these examples, and you'll have many of your own, your people will also know of great examples. Again, I'm thinking about that call to action afterwards, so what? Ask them to find an example and then find out how much the client paid if you can get access. It's tricky. And how much would it be worth today? And what was the cost when you divide 1.5 back by 25 years? Talk to your clients that way. If this is still being used globally, in 25 years? Is it worth the investment today? This is how you would value it. There are actually over 50 models of brand valuation, very slippery. They're all very different, but they all have 3 common base calculations. How much did it cost? You go straight down to the accounts department and you figure out how many hours, how much wages, any hard costs, materials, time. That's how much it cost. How much would it cost to repeat that today using another agency in today's market? So what would the market value be to recreate? This one is what City would have used, the future value. Like what's it worth to the client in future, the future revenue streams. So if you're valuing or putting a place value on an item, an asset that you've created, I would say use all 3. Start with this, it's easy. Then work out, well, what if you briefed it in for another agency to create? And then what do you think it could do? You're only going to know the answer to this if you'd followed that original chart earlier about what you're going to do to increase the value for your clients. The platform it's used on, the territory, and the duration. 3 more things that help you assess the value. So let's say it's just locally in the local magazine for the local area for this month. So the Indie Summit would have been marketing from, say, November through to this week. So where? Well, global, across multimedia, and then for at least 6-7 months. So you can start to increase the value as these 3 broaden as well. So just 6 little keys to start you thinking. You can do it in a grid and try and work out what would be the price and then go from there. So how would you sell it? Let's say we've come up with that 1.5 million. And the client's got a marketing budget of maybe they haven't told you, or maybe they have and it's not 1.5 million. How would you get them to sell and buy that from you? How would you do that? How would your staff do that? Is that a lot of money for your agencies? I'm guessing it probably is. And it will be for your team who are not used to dealing in this sort of dollar value. So you need to get them used to it by showing them examples of the best in the world. That's where we learn. Look outside your own business. Look at who are doing it really well. Harness it. For today, I just wanted to suggest licenses and royalties. So beyond the fixed price. This one you might know. So this is the original photo taken by Jacobus Reinstein. This is Michael Jordan doing a slam dunk. It was a pose at a particular time in the day. It wasn't actually on a basketball court. You can see it's on the slope, so it was curated. And one of the Nike marketing teams saw it and thought, I'd like to use that. So he rang Life magazine where it featured and said, I'd like to license that. It was $150 just for a short-term use in an internal PowerPoint deck. Respectful, perfect transaction. Do it. If you want to use somebody else's stuff, ring them up. Have a relationship. Ask them to use it. Put it on for $150. Why not? Long story short, because again, many of you will know the story, it was used again for $15,000 on billboards for a slightly longer period of time, and then eventually Nike created their own. It went to court and it only settled, I think, probably about maybe 7 years ago, and Nike was successful. So the photographer contested it and said, you've copied my work, it's an infringement. However, the courts went through 2 rounds and eventually the High Court said, no, this is not a copy of your curated on the side of a mountain. This is a silhouette and it's completely different. And so now they own, and of course it is one of the most successful brands in their division, in their suite. It's possible it could start from somebody else's work and you're inspired to create something beyond. Again, this is a very important case study for anyone in your space in the creative world. And of course, now it's worth multi-million dollars. So it was probably a smart move to create something for themselves rather than to continue to license somebody else's work. But you could license stuff and you can sell your ideas outright for 1.5 million, or maybe you could license it for the client for short-term usage. I just wanted to finish on that, the royalty one that was there as well. It's probably more relevant for that where you have a client that has products. Because as I mentioned, if their marketing budget doesn't cover 1.5 million, you might be able to license it to them, say, 20 grand a year for as long as they want to use it, or as far as it goes. Or if they have a product, you could take it out of the marketing budget altogether and have it in cost of goods sold. So every time the unit of product is sold, there might be 10 cents or $1 or whatever you work out that is paid back to you for the usage. So there could be another way to shift it. So a lot of this actually sits in IAS, International Accounting Standard 38 for intellectual property, and how your client can recognise the cost on their balance sheet and their P&L on different lines. So again, perhaps another PD session at lunch one day, or maybe a breakfast with lots of coffee. Just bring your awareness up. Financially savvy people in your agency will make money for you. So this last piece, before I conclude, is all about what are you going to do? So a quick recap. The scope of work. Internal, what it costs us. Get your cost base right. Make sure you review your rates every year. Make sure you put the cost rate in your job management system every year, or every time there's a significant change. The only time I'd say don't increase your cost rate or reduce it or change it is when we all moved out of our paid office suites and worked from home. Suddenly, a lot of us had that rent cost gone. I wouldn't reduce your cost at that point. I would have left it there. Don't change the cost rate. If you find that you've had an opportunity, your cost base has dropped, because you'll find it very hard to go back up again. You must review your sell rates every year, particularly with what's going on, and particularly your talent costs increasing. If you don't, you won't have any fat to play with to grow your agency. It'll be hard. You need to go beyond just surviving into thriving here. So be smart about it. If you are like some of my agencies that I've worked with, and I've started working with them, they haven't increased their rate for 4 to 5 years, work backwards. What if you had actually increased your rate of those 5 years by CPI at least, your Consumer Price Index, or Wage Price Index? What would it look like to your client now? And then communicate to them how much you've invested in their business for the last 5 years, and therefore a conversation about increasing rates would be appropriate. It is a bit tricky, so I'm not dismissing that part at all, but the psychological and the message that you have all come into play. Price for profit. And the sessions this afternoon on the breakout, there will be a table where we talk a bit more about profit. But it is, for me, all about beyond cost to looking at value. Price what you're worth, not what it cost. Price what it's worth for your client. And the call to action today from me to you is effectively anything that you've heard today that you think your team would be interested in. Make sure you create a forum for them to discuss it, to show great work, to learn from others. That's why we're here today. We're going to hear from a wealth of experience from speakers. Every one of you in the room has a unique story. It's worth listening and talking to each other and sharing. And then take it back to your people. Let them learn as well. Put down a 90-day sprint. For 3 months, what am I going to do? Just pick 3 things. If it's the hourly rate, focus on the hourly rate. If it's, you know what, I think I'd like to start using trademarks and copyrights and talking to my clients. Create a new service where we're creating logos, taglines, brand for our client. But I'm also going to sell them that service of legally protecting it for them. If they don't have their own legal department, that's a new service. Straight away, it's cost you nothing. You might engage a lawyer to help you with some of the trademarking, but otherwise it's just pure new income. Definitely the PD sessions for me. Make your team financially savvy little business owners within your business. And each one of you has something unique to offer, and I think it's really important that you understand the next tagline that you're going to hear, similar to Carolyn Davids for Nike, who for $35 US, 52 years ago, created the swoosh. This next one was created by a 23-year-old, and it was in the same time actually, so about 50 years ago, is now no longer just a brand that they use, it is their mission, their brand mission. And I'm going to leave this last piece with you. Keep it simple. Don't overthink it. Help your team to understand, yes, there's inputs, outputs, but it's the outcomes and the impact you're making for client. Price for profit. Think about using some visuals. Help them understand, train them. And it's all because
you're worth it.
Because you're worth it.
Because you're worth it.
We're worth it.
It's unique. You're worth it.
Thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate your listening. So if any of you are thinking, nah, don't buy any of that, I'm here to tell you there are a lot of agencies that I have worked with that put this all into play. They weren't doing it yesterday, they put a group together, and then they got some wins. It is so exciting for me to hopefully inspire some of you, and I'd love to hear your stories if you do pick up the rush rate or a VIP, or you create a retainer that you hadn't had before out of today. Challenge yourself to do something different. So we're now going to have